Croeso and welcome to our latest podcast. I'm Jon Wright, HMI with Estyn, and the focus of our conversation today is a little bit more introspective than usual, focusing on how inspectorates can use AI to assist with their work and the opportunities, risks and challenges that this brings. So this is something that we've been working on in collaboration with inspectors across Europe over the last few months, culminating in the conference that we're hosting in Cardiff this week. I'm delighted to be joined by a colleague from Estyn and colleagues from Norway to explore some of these issues a little further. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Koles. I'm an inspector at the Norwegian Directorate for Education and Training.
Hi, I'm Rhydian David, Assistant Director at Estyn and also a member of the AI team.
And I'm Ragnhild Christensen, and I'm also a school inspector in Norway.
Okay, so great to see you all this morning. So perhaps the best thing for us to do is to just sort of delve into what we actually mean by AI in terms of supporting inspection and what that kind of means in a practical sense. So maybe some examples of what that could mean, how we can use AI to help our work.
I suppose one of the ways of framing the question is not necessarily to start with AI. It's to take a step back and think, well, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are these sort of untapped benefits? And also, what are the issues that we're trying to solve? I think framing the question in that way guards against the risk of just doing something to do with AI for the sake of it being AI. And indeed, that's the approach that we took at Estyn. So by having a long list of issues that we're trying to work through or some benefits that we're trying to realise, we came up with a series of projects that we've been piloting. One instance, for example, is for every inspection that we do, there is an output. There is that inspection report. We also tailor that report for the parents and carers, so we're able to convey that message to them. But then we thought, well, what about the learners? So using AI, we've been able to save time or produce drafts specific for learners in a really quick way. Again, we need to guard ourselves against ensuring that the prompt is really, really tight and that we are always verifying the output. We are very mindful that ChatGPT produces very plausible text, but it has no regard for the truth. So by tightening the prompt and making sure that inspectors know that they have to verify everything, we've been able to make great progress in that respect. And that point around us verifying every output is just so pivotal. It's Estyn's logo on the inspection reports, not ChatGPT's. So I think that's one example where we've made some real good headway.
Yeah, sure. And in Norway, what kinds of things have you been looking at?
Yeah, we've had a similar approach. We've been looking at instead of looking at how can we use this new tech, we're constantly looking at our workflow, at how we do our inspection work, and now with these new tools, we've been looking at it again and thinking where can we benefit from this new technology. And then, of course, it's most effective when we look at things that are repetitive, things that are heavy, very time-consuming, and tiring for people who work with it. And so we have a few pilot projects that we have tried out with, which is mostly based around ChatGPT or generative models like that. So one of them is that we have a document checker, because every year we do financial inspections of all the private schools in Norway. So that's about a little less than 400 schools that all have to submit a lot of documents, their annual reports and annual financial statements and specific statements for different parts of their organizations. And in Norway, you're not allowed to make profit from public funding. So we control that the public funding actually goes to all the students and not to the owners. And then previously we had to look through all of these documents manually. And that process they would submit in the beginning of June, and that process would take months to go through all the documents to see that they had submitted everything. And that's just to see that everything is submitted correctly. Then you also had to analyze the numbers. And now we have a document checker that controls mainly whether the documents are there and whether the contents of the documents match what they are supposed to hand in. So we save a lot of time doing that initial control of the document. We went from, as I said, a few weeks to, several weeks to about 14 hours of work for that initial part. And then with some follow-up, we spent about 20 hours in total following up that.
Okay.
And what it does is it reads the documents, it classifies them, and if it finds anything that maybe isn't correct, then it flags it. It doesn't take any decisions itself, because that has been very important for us as well, that it's our logo on it, it's our name on it. Yeah. So we've set it to intentionally be very strict, so that it will often flag things that are okay, but we would rather have it flag things that are okay than miss something that is not okay. And then we have inspectors who go through and check it. But it saves us a lot of time, because they already know what they will be looking for, and they know which documents may have a mistake. So it goes a lot faster to check whether the documents are complete, and to notify the schools, because often the schools don't do this out of bad intent. And there's a lot of rules and a lot of things to keep track of. So we can then notify them that you need to submit this as well. And then they do that. But it's better to do it the week after they submitted than a month after, or 2 months.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I think what Daniel is saying, and what I can hear Ridian is saying as well, is that we all kind of started thinking about, instead of just that the aim isn't to use AI as much as possible, but it's kind of figuring out how AI can help us in doing our work more efficiently and better, and not just use AI because it's a fun tool to use, but actually use it for tasks that will help us have more time to the things that actually matter, more time to go into schools and do inspections, or to save us a lot of time to be more efficient. And that's the approach we have taken. So the document checker is one of those things that we have used it for. And then we are trying out different things as well, with sound recordings, which I'm sure Daniel will say more about. But we also are trying it out, especially using ChatGPT, with student reports and summaries of our reports. Because in Norway, an inspection process is very much also a legal process. It's difficult language, it's legal language. And so when you want to communicate to the parents and to the students, you have to make sure that you do that in a way that they can understand. And so now we're trying out ChatGPT to see if they can help us produce student reports or summaries for students and parents that can be better than we can do ourselves, and that will save us time in doing so. And especially, I think, because we do inspections for all age groups, students of all age groups, that they can help, ChatGPT can help us in making sure that it's age appropriate, better than we actually can ourselves.
Okay. So it's almost like it seems to me that there are kind of two ways that maybe two main areas that we're using AI to assist with our work. One is to do things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So we're kind of thinking about maybe pupil reports and so on. I know certainly for us in Estyn, we wouldn't have the time to be able to produce those in addition to everything else we do on inspection. And the other is perhaps saving time to enable to be able to do the more kind of human things that machines or digital tools can't assist us with. So I suppose one of the issues with the use of AI is there are risks associated with it as well, and perhaps one of the things that we need to give some real kind of consideration to in particular is the data. So what happens with the data that we input into AI, and what kind of considerations do we need to have around that? I know that's something which we've had lots and lots of discussions around. So I don't know, maybe whether you want to say something around that and how we need to consider the use of data in terms of keeping that data safe.
Well, I think at least for us, when we go do an inspection, schools are obliged to send us documentations. And that information and documentation can contain sensitive information about students, about the schools, about staff, about parents. And they need to trust us with that information, that we handle that in a safe and ethical way. And so it's the same if you go to a doctor and you trust them with your health information. So it's the same when they come to us. I think with the AI tools now, why this is especially important is that a lot of inspectors, but also as private persons, we have these AI tools available to us on our computers, on our phones. So it's very accessible. And it's quite tempting to you have all of this information, you're busy at work, you just want to get some help and you want to just put all of this information into AI and they can help you get a kind of a summary of that information or whatever you need help with. But, however, you need to be aware of where that information goes. Where is it stored? Who has access to that information? These servers, where is it stored? What do you do with this information? Where does it go? And so it's very important that you kind of do an assessment of those risks before you start using these AI tools. To be able to do that, I think you need to know what kind of legal framework comes into place when doing that. But it also requires a certain amount of technical knowledge because you need to know about these AI systems. You need to know about service. You need to know about data flow. And so I think that makes it quite complicated for some. And then there's also risk then that you don't do those risk assessments properly before that because you don't have enough knowledge of that. Yeah. And you can see now that there are stories of people who have put in this information and it comes out afterwards that, okay, we didn't do a proper risk assessment. This wasn't safe enough. Yeah. And when you especially give these tools to inspectors to use, it's very important that you have done that assessment in advance and that you also train your staff to use it properly. Yeah.
So you can talk about the lure of AI and that's all you're hearing is this shiny new tool that's going to bring efficiencies. But and the best way to sort of achieve that is to play around with it. But you need to make that playground safe in the first place. And that's where those guardrails come in. And it's the data protection impact assessments. It's not glamorous. It's not particularly sexy. And I'm aware I'm speaking to two solicitors here. But that task of undertaking that assessment is something that is essential and something that we did right from the outset at Estyn. We put those guardrails in place so that in a controlled environment we were able to pilot safely and securely. And it's fair to note as well, there's a lot of good resource out there, especially in the UK. We benefited from toolkits and templates from the Information Commissioner's Officer. And that gave us that assurance and indeed we were able to share that with a workforce so that we were able to move forward on this AI journey, but in a safe and secure way.
Yeah. I think that's something that was really important to us, wasn't it? Before we started experimenting with AI and thinking about different ways that we could use it, that we were really sure from the outset about what was happening with that data before we began experimenting and seeing what was possible. Anything else around Norway and how you've...
Well, I think it's important. A lot of people... or my impression is that a lot of people see AI as something new, something different, something disconnected from how we used to handle data before. But like GDPR is the same and data protection is the same as it was before. The thing that changed is that it's maybe a bit harder to know where the data goes with these tools than it was before. As Ragnar mentioned, you need the technical knowledge to understand what happens to the data when you put it in.
And indeed, in terms of if you don't know, and it is complex, as you've both alluded to there, but the starting point is, well, if you don't know, you don't put the information in.
Yeah.
And again, it's the glamour and the allure of AI versus, well, you have to go through that drudge work. It's not particularly exciting. No. I've now learned when my boss was to tell me, Rhydian, I've got an opportunity for you. I know I need to be a bit skeptical about it, because that's exactly what that task was. But one of the first tasks that we did was to make sure that those guardrails are in place. And we've instilled that culture as well within our workforce. So if in doubt, you do not engage with it until you're secure and safe in the knowledge that what you're putting in to what AI tool complies with our data impact assessment.
But even then, you also have to consider whether the use of that data is within the scope of what you have collected the data for, because you can only use the data for the purpose it was collected for. So if putting it into a new tool is a new form of using that data, then you're not allowed to. And you also have to consider data minimization. So you're not allowed to keep more data than you need for that purpose. And then you have to consider, well, if I put it into this AI tool, how can I be sure that I can remove it afterwards? How can I take the data out and delete it? Will the GPT store this information in its memory? Well, then the employees need to know how to delete those memory files.
Yeah, just on the point of around being prudent and selective with the inputs, and it's just something that we've been working on at Estyn. On that very point is a named entity recognition model, so essentially a redactor tool. So if you do have information, and it may or may not have place names in there, or may or may not have individuals' names in there, again, you as a human don't want to spend time redacting before you put that into an AI machine. So the NER, the redactor tool that we've developed, has been something which has been particularly encouraging in terms of its use. We can put a document through the redactor tool. Within seconds, we get it a redacted version, so names and place names are removed, so therefore the chances of it being a personal identifiable information is reduced significantly, and then we can use, with a bit more confidence, we can then use that information with AI. So that's something, again, it all feeds into that culture of safety first that we've applied at Estyn.
So in our inspectorate, we don't have a reduction tool like that. But what we have is that we have very clear guidelines in terms of who does what. So there is a system in terms of what we do and when it's done. So there's one person who will conduct our DPIAs, for instance, who will do that for us. And we also have had a training session with our other inspectors and saying to them, these are the things that you can use AI for. You cannot use it for this. And unless it is on our list, we have an AI group who specifically works on these tasks. And if it's not on that list, you're not allowed to do it. Even if you think it's safe yourself, it shouldn't be up to the individual who decides what's safe or not. It needs to come from the organization. It needs to have done an assessment of whether this is safe or not. It's also about making sure that the inspectors who do their job feel safe in undertaking their jobs and doing that well. And they shouldn't have to rely on their gut feeling or knowing, is this safe or not? They should just know that, well, this is completely safe. I'm doing my job. There's no risk. Someone else has done this job and I know exactly what I can and cannot do. Yeah. If you're unsure, like you said, don't do it. Then you need to ask before you do it. Yeah. And so for us, we have done it in the sense where we have a list of specific things you can do. If it's not on the list, you're not allowed to do it. Yeah,
no, that's great. And again, that chimes with the governance setup that we have at Estyn around the use of AI tools. And again, I suppose it touches upon the what AI means for the workforce. Because again, as inspectors, again, I'm not an inspector myself, but there are very, very busy individuals, and we're not going to turn them into technical AI experts, and that's, I don't think, is the right way around. But what we need to do is to equip them with the clear understanding of what AI can do, what it can't do, and just to give them that confidence to be able to use it in a way which is discerning. And think that, well, we have embedded now a series of professional learning around AI with our workforce. And it isn't just a one-off tick box exercise. There we do. We had that little 10-minute presentation on AI. It's something that's embedded, and we have it as part of all of our professional learning weeks. Again, it builds up the confidence, it builds up the knowledge base.
There's kind of two things there, isn't there? Really, sort of linking the data side of things and the safety side of things with the professional learning side. It's kind of like ensuring people have the freedom to experiment with AI and be able to explore what it can and what it can't do, but by making sure beforehand that the data issues are dealt with. And you were saying in Norway, you have someone who completes those DPIAs for you and then says you can use this tool and you can experiment with it in this way, but then also making sure that they've got the skills and the understanding. You're building that culture within the organisation. So, and I know we've done a lot of work on that in Estyn in terms of trying to give people the skills and the understanding around that. What's the approach been in terms of Norway in terms of developing the workforce and their ability to be able to use AI safely?
Yeah, well, we have, at least with our inspectors in our department, we had sessions with them in trying to explain what kind of tools we have available, what you can use them for, what you cannot do. There's guidelines that we have in our directorate and also as inspectors in terms of what to do. And then there's also, because it's like Ridian says, understanding also how these tools work, having to have that understanding of, if you have a keyboard and you press in F, an F will come up on your screen. It will be the same result each time. But when you use ChatGPT or a language model, it will produce a different result each time, right? So it's also training them and understanding how that works. Yeah. Because the more they know, the more they can also know how to be critical in terms of the use, but also feel more safe in how to use it. And so it's not only about what you can't do, but also what you can do, what the opportunities are. And I think one of the things we have done in Norway as well is we have used AI with sound recordings. And one of the things we have done then is we record, when we go out to schools, we record interviews. And then we use AI afterwards to get a transcription of that. But when we are out in the schools using this, it's important for the inspectors to also know how does this work, so that they can also explain when we're out doing interviews, if they have questions for us, the teachers or the students, that they feel confident, that they know how this works. They know, so they can answer these questions for them, and they feel also safe in using it. Because when you want the inspectors to use AI, you also want to make sure that they know how to use it, but they also understand a little bit of the technical side to it, so they feel confident in what you're doing.
Most definitely. And you've touched upon something there, Ragnhild, which I think is really pertinent and valuable professional learning for inspectors, or indeed anybody who wants to try to get their head around. We talk about artificial intelligence. Essentially, we focus on generative AI. And there's a tendency to focus on, for example, Copilot, and trying to get your head around Copilot and understand how Copilot works. Then you understand that OpenAI has ChatGPT, and try to get your head around that. Then there's Anthropic. Then there's Gemini and all of these different products. And then, understandably, people can be overwhelmed and switch off. Whereas professional learning, understanding the origins and evolution of the G, the generative, the P, the pre-trained, the T, the transformer, understanding that origin and evolution means that whatever the product is, whatever version of Anthropic is being released, 80% what the technology is, what are the biases, how the back propagation works in terms of that pre-training element. You understand that the magic of AI isn't magical; it's the transformer. That is far better use of PL than trying to understand all of these different products, because it's overwhelming, and also you're potentially susceptible to the marketing claims that a lot of these AI products are doing, whereas some of it's true and some of it is pure snake oil. So I think that grounding in the G and the P and the T, I think is almost essential or mandatory training, which would help people steer and make their own conclusions around AI.
I think one of the things that we did in Estyn, which was really, really valuable, was at one point we ensured that people across the organisation had access to an AI tool to give them time to experiment with it within those given parameters, so that everybody had an understanding of how it works and so on, and what it was capable of and what it wasn't. But I think it's a key principle what you're saying there around people understanding the principles of AI and how it works, and it not being about the individual tools. Because the other thing that we're finding, I think, as well, is that different tools are good for different things. So it isn't just a kind of one size fits all. So we're talking about professional learning not being a one-off event, and about it being embedded. Is there anything more in terms of Norway and the approach that you've been taking, Daniel?
Well, I think, like you said, we've been talking about understanding what it can do. I think it's also important to maybe emphasize what it can't do, because whenever something new and exciting like this comes around, people will maybe think that it can do a lot more than it actually can, and especially when the new tool is designed to sound convincing. So the outputs you will get if you ask it to analyze something or to write something for you, it may sound very convincing, but you have to be very critical of what you get, garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't give it something, if it doesn't have good data to build on, it can't magically make good data out of it. But it can make up good data. So you have to be aware that it's designed to write in a convincing way. Not necessarily to write correctly. Yeah.
No, there's definitely something there about the fact that it produces outputs that are very, very convincing, even if they're completely inaccurate. It can often look right. I was taking part in a training session recently with colleagues around how we might use AI to support some of our thematic work. And part of that conversation was around when not to use it, when it might be inappropriate to use it, but also kind of checking those outputs as well.
I think also that what Daniel's saying is it takes a lot of work to actually get your AI tool or AI system to do, you have to spend a lot of time prompting it correctly. It's a lot of trying and failing. So you can use AI and it can produce good results, but it takes a lot of time to do that. And so therefore in Norway we have, instead of everyone individual sitting and doing these things, we have an AI group who does that, because it is very time consuming, and it's a lot of trying and failing. So you might try for different tasks that we think we might use AI for this. And then we spend a lot of time testing it, and then, okay, it didn't work out. But then you can have 1 or 2 people doing that instead of like 15 people sitting, wasting time doing that. And it takes time to be able to be good at prompting or giving directions to the AI systems in order to get what you want from it. But when you do that, it can actually also create really good things. So it's not to say you can never use AI. It's important to say that as well. It's just saying that it's not going to fix everything, and it's not just put anything in there and then trust what it comes out with.
Yeah, these are tools that require a lot of computational power. So that means that there are large American companies that run most of the models we use, and they will be affected by U.S. legislation, U.S. morals. Some things will be censored that maybe would not be censored in our context, or could be censored, and you need to be aware of that. If for instance, when we use this audio recording, so what we do is we record interviews when we go to schools, and these interviews are then transcribed by a model called Whisper, which is also made by OpenAI, same as the makers of ChatGPT. and it analyzes what they say and it transcribes it, and then we have a ChatGPT model that makes a note. And during that process, we have to make sure that it doesn't censor anything that is being said, because we need the information that is being said by the people we interview. And we can sometimes talk about topics that are sensitive, like we talk about school environment, about psychosocial environment. And in some cases, there can be stories of people who have suffered traumatic incidents, like abuse. And if the models then censor things related to abuse, then that can be a problem. Then we have to reconsider if these interviews contain something that could be censored. We need to be extra aware that the note that is produced in the end reflects what was actually said. And that might mean that we have to do some manual typing as well.
Okay, so going back to that garbage in, garbage out expression, which we've used with digital tools for many years now. So there's the importance of, for example, making sure that staff, colleagues understand what a good prompt looks like. And it's actually harder than you think in order to put a good prompt together. But also, again, checking the outputs as well, making sure that what it produces are what we need and that they're not affected by bias and so on, and that they're correct and accurate. So I guess something that might be useful to kind of finish off now might be to look at where we might be in a few years' time. And it's almost because of the rapid growth of AI and its increasing power, it's not even looking 5 years ahead. I mean, what it can do now compared to 12 months ago is kind of incredible. So perhaps just looking maybe in 2 years' time, how do you think AI may be impacting on our inspection processes in a couple of years' time? If we were to have this discussion again, how would things be different 2 years further down the line?
I think you have to, you can divide it in what we are thinking that we want to do, or plans we have for tools we want to explore. But also you have to think about how AI will be part of society in several ways. People have AI companions in their phones. In several other ways, people will interact with these tools more, maybe without even knowing that they are AI tools. So one thing is the plans we have. We mentioned some of it already. We've been looking a lot at input now. We've been looking at recording interviews and collecting documents and reading them. My guess is we will look more at output as well, how to write letters to pupils and to parents, how to communicate our findings to a broader audience, like you guys are doing with podcasts. You're ahead of us there. But we also have to make sure that, like, when it comes to the part where people are maybe not thinking about using AI tools, that highlights the importance of doing the training of the workforce, that even though you are used to using this tool in your private life, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can use it in the workplace. Okay. And you have to be aware that you actually are using this tool, because maybe you don't even know. Like, Copilot is now integrated in all Office programs, and you need to know that Copilot is creating answers that you might not be able to trust.
Yeah, so there's that kind of ongoing risk as well, and it is just appearing everywhere now, isn't it? It's like, for example, when you produce a Word document, AI produces a summary for you at the top. So it's ever evolving.
Well, to answer the question, where will we be in 2 years? I suppose history is a good indicator. If you look back in 2 years' time, and now we're seeing autocomplete or spell checking. Again, AI-driven, that's now part and parcel, and it's just something that we accept without a second's thought. The suggestion to draft a reply to an email, again, that's now something that's coming more commonplace. Or if you've drafted an email, it suggests to redraft it. So it would have been pretty crazy 4 years ago. We were thinking in 2 years' time that's where we'll be. So I suspect with the acceleration of AI tools, it'll be equally as sort of mind-boggling. But I think, to pick up on Daniel's point, the shift towards AI being something distinct and something that you need to log into as a separate entity, and that now creeping into our daily life, is something that will continue and will accelerate. So in 2 years' time, I did have one scenario which was particularly bleak, but for the purposes of the podcast, I'll just keep a maybe more constructive, more balanced outlook. In 2 years' time, if we were to say that every single person would have a personal AI assistant, whereby you look at your emails in the morning and they'd go, look, I've drafted this presentation for you that you're delivering, and this is the briefing document that you need to share with your minister, and I've drafted emails that you need to send before 12 o'clock. Do you want to look at and check these, please? I don't think that's beyond the realms of possibilities, and there's already signs of that happening already. There'll be sort of real insights during meetings. So when there's the use of transcription, I think that will improve. But instead of those conversations where you go, oh, was that decision ever approved by this particular authority? Well, you could have real insights to go, yes, it was. It was actually approved by this board on this date. Okay, great. So then you're not stopping and starting or creating action logs for a human to sort of check offline. I think that will be far more prevalent. And likewise, there'll be real-time sort of draft documentations of, if you were to, in a meeting, and you record a decision, well, AI can then automatically update what that risk register would look like in light of that decision. What does the timeline of delivery look like? What does the training materials look like? And these presentations will be produced. And I suppose the other element would be the increase in organisations adopting a secure enclosed environment of an AI model, whereby instead of asking a colleague, what would one do in this situation or scenario, you would just ask your bot, which is all of essentially your intranet and all of your internal library, and you can get that feedback in real time. So I think there's sort of 4 tangible examples there, whereby in 2 years' time, I mean, time will tell whether I'm right or not. But I think that's not beyond the realms of absurdity, and it's something that's pretty.
I think, and I think the personal assistant side of things we're already seeing, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know, within Copilot. I mean, I certainly often, if I'm on leave and I come back and I've got a whole load of emails, I'll certainly use Copilot to help me summarize what the key messages are and so on, and how I need to catch up with certain people about certain things.
But I also think that, you know, as these AI models also develop high speed, you know, so it's hard to kind of predict the future. Where will we be in 2 and 5 years? Because like we talked about, some of the work that we use AI for now has taken us a long time to get it right and to do it properly. But maybe in 2 and 5 years, those processes will also go much quicker, because the AI models are better as well, and we have more knowledge. But I also think it's important to remember that when we do inspections, we do this for the students. We are in schools. These are the students we do these inspections for. And it's important that they trust us as inspectors, that we do this properly and correctly. So that's why it's important that we handle the data correctly and that we do these processes in a good way. We have transparency in where we use AI. But then again, in 2 and 5 years, this could be so common within society that, you know, students use it in school, parents use it. So it's not really that necessarily a big deal if you use AI anymore to do certain processes. But I still think it's important that we use AI, even if it's in 2 years or 5 years, we do it in a safe and ethical way. That means that the schools can trust us when we do our inspections, that they can trust that what we deliver to them, especially in our reports, that is correct and it's done in a safe way.
Yeah, most definitely. You talk then about AI and culture in terms of society. The adoption of AI will mean that it's more sort of accessible and it's less different that if an inspector was to use AI. In the same way, I suppose, social media started. There was the early adopters, and then now it's commonplace. Yet the damage or the potential risks are still there. So in the same way, whilst yes, the adoption of AI will inevitably increase, the importance of making sure that we still do it appropriately and safely is tantamount and paramount. I mean, and then there's another point as well about if organisations were to misuse data or whatever, and that may or may not be via an AI tool, there are levers in place and there's fines. So there are billion-dollar fines given to the big tech companies. Okay, we wouldn't be in the same realms in terms of the financial fines, but the financial fine is almost irrelevant because the word that you use there is trust. And if we as inspectorates don't have trust, then we don't have anything. So I think that's a really important point that we need to keep in mind.
But it would be good in 2 or 5 years' time if we had actually, because what you're looking for always when doing your work is to do your work the best way possible, to have more time to what actually matters and what's important. And I think if AI can help us with that, to kind of take away some of these tasks that are very time consuming, but doesn't necessarily require a lot of human thinking or critical thinking, then great. Then that's really great, isn't it? If AI can help us to do that.
Interesting when people talk about the vision of AI at Estyn, and if you were to sort of literally draw a picture of what it looks like, well, it's actually inspectors increasing the professional dialogue with the profession. It's inspectors out in the class and seeing the pupils and the learners, because AI just enables that to happen. And it's not a picture of robots or algorithms or servers or cloud computing or anything like that. It's enabling us to do, as you say, the important thing, that human thing, and we can do more of it.
I'm thinking just another aspect that we haven't touched upon much is that we've been talking a lot about how we use AI in our inspections, but we also have to consider how the school's use of AI will affect how we inspect them. Whether we inspect directly how they use AI, I don't know if we will do that in Norway at least, but like the example you mentioned with social media, how that came in and changed. We are inspecting social media in a way when we inspect the school environment. Then how the school pays attention to the students' use of social media and how they can use social media for bullying, for instance. That is an important part of what we control in those inspections. And I suspect AI will also become integrated in the lives of the pupils and in the lives of the schools and teachers. And then that becomes part of the evidence base that we have to look at when we do our inspections as well.
I think that's a really, really good point, and it's something that we've been focusing on recently within Estyn, and not something we've touched on much in this particular podcast, but the risks of AI in terms of their effects on learners, and how we engage with that when we are inspecting schools. There's another podcast that we're publishing as well, where we met with some colleagues from Estonia and talked about the work that they've been doing around that, which builds on that. So if I just kind of draw things together, really, really interesting discussion. I mean, there's a huge amount that we've been working on over the last 18 months, and I think hopefully we've covered some of that in the past few minutes. But it seems to me the sort of key messages from this are that there's huge potential for AI to support us in our inspection work if it's used in the right way. And I think a key point you were making there, Rydian, as well, is what do we do with that extra time? And I think that's really, really important. So, for example, for me, if I'm leading an inspection of a primary school and I can use AI to help draw together my conclusions around sort of lesson observations, learning walks and so on, that'll give me more time to engage with more learners, to speak to them about the quality of provision in the school, to find out about their experience of the school. So it's enabling us to do the things that the digital tools can't. But within that, there are these risks as well that we've talked about in terms of data, and we talked about reputation as well. I mean, our organisations, they're based on trust. They're based on people believing that when we go into schools, we're able to come to accurate conclusions about the work of that provider, and we can't undermine that. And I think finally, also, we talked about the importance of professional learning and building the skills of our workforce so they're able to use AI in a way that is most effective. So again, thank you all for your contributions. I just want to say that there's more information about Estyn's work with AI on our website, and you'll find a couple of thematic reports there around the use of AI in schools and in colleges as well. And it just remains to thank you as listeners for tuning in, listening to the podcast, and to thank my guests for contributing and for coming all the way from Norway to take part in this discussion this morning as well. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Diolch.